Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This inside line is going to be all about differential gears. I'm going to break down why I went with 488s for my 37s. Was it a good idea over 513s? And some things to consider before investing in differential gears for your Jeep Gladiator. Let's start with the basics. Now, I own a 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. Now, it has the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6, 8-speed automatic transmission behind that. Like all other Rubicons that are not diesel, this one came with 410 differential gears from the factory. Now, pretty early on, I swapped out to a set of 35 by 1150 Nitto Trail Grapplers. It was recalibrated with the Taser. Power was fine, not really a big deal there. Didn't even consider re-gearing the differentials for 35s and 410s. It really works fine. You keep 8th gear on the highway just fine. So that setup, very happy with. Now, eventually I ended up moving to a 37 by 1250 Nitto Trail Grappler on an AEV Bora dual sport wheel. It's a 17-inch bead lock. You can run this wheel kind of as bead lock or not. I'm actually running it in the true bead lock configuration. Now, it's a pretty heavy duty tire and wheel package. It's not the lightest, but it's one of those tires that I know works really well off-road. I needed a bead lock and I wanted something that had a really high amount of back spacing, basically to keep the scrub radius down on this truck so it would drive a little bit better. So that's kind of how I ended up with that tire and wheel package, and that's really what ultimately led to this whole differential gear change. Now, I ran 410s and 37s for quite some time, and it is definitely livable. I am based out of Wilmington, North Carolina, so I'm here in the coastal plains. It's not super hilly, and you can really get away with not having a ton of gearing because of that. As I am recording this video, all Gladiators come with 3rd generation Dana 44 axles front and rear. It doesn't matter what Gladiator you purchased, you're going to get a Dana 44 3rd generation differential, high pinion front, low pinion rear. Okay, so 488 versus 513. This doesn't have to be that complicated. In my opinion, look at it like this. If your Jeep tows frequently, you're at a pretty high elevation, or at least you explore the mountains quite frequently, or you have a lot of gear, and I'm talking skid plates, front and rear bumpers, a ton of overland stuff in the back, go ahead and go 513. I don't believe you'll regret that. The difference between 488 and 513 is not significant. Now, that being said, I went with 488. The reason being is I live in North Carolina where it's not super mountainous. I live in a fairly flat area. Most of my driving is 60 miles per hour and below. So 488 was going to be better in the fuel economy range, which was important to me. And my Jeep's not very heavy. All I have beyond the 37s here is a rugged ridge stubby front bumper and a 3-inch JKS suspension kit. There's not a ton of heavy aftermarket items. I do occasionally put my rooftop tent in the back. It's a low profile setup, but it's still not a lot. So for me, the 488s made the most sense. Now, that being said, I do feel like it's worth mentioning that when I did drive this thing to Moab, Utah, I found, keeping those posted speed limits of 75 miles per hour, when you got a headwind, it wouldn't keep 8th gear. It would definitely drop into 7th, sometimes all the way down into 6th gear, which really penalized the fuel economy on it. Overall, the 488 still did a very good job for most of the trip, keeping me in 8th gear. So I don't want to just say that, oh, 488s are worthless by any means, but it definitely made me consider why 513s are so important if you live at an elevation, or really if you're on the highway a lot where you're at that 75 mile an hour posted speed limit all the time. That extra bit of gearing is definitely going to help. Another thing worth mentioning is originally I was hoping that 488s would still allow me to drop into 4th gear on the highway as a passing gear. So when you go to floor it, and let's say you're at 60 miles an hour and you're trying to get around somebody, I was hoping it would drop down into 4th. It won't do it. I knew that it wouldn't do it with a 513 from experience with other Gladiators, but I was hoping 488 would allow it to do it. Unfortunately, it won't, which is kind of a bummer because these engines really make their power higher in the RPM range, and so dropping into fifth, it just doesn't give you as much passing ump as I would like. So just something to keep in mind. In terms of actually purchasing the gears and getting them installed, I went with a Nitro Gear differential set. Got the full master install kit and everything from them. I went with Nitro Gear quite simply because I've used them on previous builds. I've had them on my S10, I've had them on JKs, never had a failure, never had an installer tell me that they were a nightmare to put in, never had any gear noise, all things that are very important to sort of benchmarks for a good gear set. So very happy with the Nitro Gear product. In terms of getting them installed, it wasn't something that I was going to do, so I got Low Range 4x4 here in Wilmington to do it. It's about a day job. It's pretty involved. The front axle takes a little bit more time because it does have the front axle disconnect. It is a semi-float rear axle, so it's a little bit faster. These guys do gears all the time, so it wasn't a big deal for them. You know, it's just one of those things that I don't recommend anyone trying it at home. It's doing gears. It's not a, hey, I'm gonna install a lift kit type thing. So I would definitely recommend leaving that to the professionals. Once they were installed, you've got about 500 miles that you sort of have to baby the gear set, so no hard four-wheel drive burnouts or anything crazy. Basically, you're going to drive it for about 30 minutes, let the gears cool down, and then drive it for a little bit more. You know, stop and go, picking up the kids and stuff, work perfect for that. Now, in terms of power on road, what I'll say is this. Going from 410s to 488s made a significant difference in just how the Jeep accelerated. In fact, the stock 0 to 60 on this Gladiator is 7.9 seconds. Now with the Taser, I'm able to test what the 0 to 60 is on this now, and I'm able to do it in 8.46 seconds. So that's not a huge gap from where this thing was stock. It's fairly impressive that 488's kind of got me back there. So I think that's a big deal. It kind of shows really the good investment in going with a differential gear, whether you go 488 or 513. Matter of fact, 513 probably gets you a little bit faster out of the hole than the 488, but very happy with that. It keeps 7th and 8th gear without issue. I'm pretty consistently at speeds below 60 miles per hour, so I'm constantly in a low RPM, usually below 2,000 RPM, and the thing's getting pretty good fuel economy. You know, I went from basically an average of about 14 and a half to I'm usually anywhere from 16 to 17 and a half miles per gallon with the 488s and 37s, which I don't think is really that bad at all. Overall drivability, with it being recalibrated, the transmission shifts smoothly. It just feels way more sprightly and fun to drive than it did versus just having the 410. So that I feel like is well worth it. Off-road, I don't feel like, you know, this was a significant off-road upgrade in that in low range with the 4-to-1 and the 410s, it was fine with 37s. Regearing just for that really wasn't necessary. Yes, in low range now, there's more control. First gear is super low at this point. I end up spending most of my time in second and third off-roads in low range. So keep that in mind. Now I will say in high range, however, so if you're doing a lot of overlanding, you know, long gravel dirt roads, that type of thing, or you're driving in some snow or sand, high range is great in this thing. You can completely defeat all the nannies by holding down the ESC button for a while. You get all the little ABS lights flashing at you thanks to the Taser. And you can just let this thing rip in either two-wheel drive high or four-wheel drive high, and it works really well. I've been real happy with how the power feels with 488s and having that usable high range in multiple scenarios. So I think that's a really good sign that, you know, number one, the 8-speed works fantastic with this, but the 488s really just made this thing kind of turn up and work really well in high range. So that was well worth it. Overall, very happy with this investment. You know, you're going to spend anywhere from $1,500, $2,000. It just depends. I've seen prices all over the place on what it costs to do differential gears. You know, I think it's worth it. You get your performance back, you get fuel economy out of it. It just makes the vehicle a little bit more fun to drive, in my opinion. So overall, very happy with this investment. I think for the cost and benefit, it's well worth it. If you guys have any questions, any specific RPMs you want to know, just drop them in the comments. I'll be happy to tell you, hey, it's this RPM at this speed. If you have any direct questions for me, you can always Instagram stalk me at Ali Mansour Editor. And that's really about it for this episode. Still got some stuff coming down the pipeline for this thing. So hopefully you guys like Gladiator builds, and if not, just watch one of my other videos that doesn't have Gladiator in it at all. No problem. All right, well, I appreciate you guys watching and hope to see you guys on the trail soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.